On Sunday, March 25th, 2012, Ed Gould, the creator of Eddsworld, sadly passed away after a 6-year-long battle with cancer. For Eddsworld fans, it was a very sad day, and it left us asking ourselves, what's going to happen to the show? Fortunately, it was revealed that through a fundraiser called Eddsworld Legacy, new episodes would continue to be produced, with Tom serving as producer and Paul Tervord as the new head of animation. With this new era of Eddsworld, things like the animation, the writing, and the characters would be going through some big changes. And Space Face is where the show made that transition. In this 2-part episode, the plot revolves around Ed, Matt, and Tom getting abducted by aliens. They're led by Commander Bai, who tells them that they used their vanity to power their ship. But after it broke down, they got fatter and fatter until they couldn't use their self-esteem to get back home. So they decide to use Matt as their fuel source because no one else in the world could possibly be as vain as him. This is one of the cleverest, most original setups for an Eddsworld episode I've seen in years. But the writing as a whole has a few faults to it that I noticed even when this episode first came out. First off, when the aliens see how much Matt can be of use to them, they just decide to dump him and the guys off through the garbage disposal bay. Why? He's your only chance at getting home and you're just gonna throw him away? Is it because his vanity is too powerful and you're worried that he'll send you off course? I guess that makes sense, but you still need that power. They probably didn't even think of that because they were apparently dumb enough to get themselves sucked into space. They might have been attractive before, but they're not exactly the brightest stars in the galaxy. Second, is it me or does Tom just have a few too many lines? Ed, of course, sadly passed away before this episode was released, so I just assumed that most of Tom's lines, specifically in part 2, were written for Ed but given to him at the last second. I bring this up because near the end of the episode, Ed says this.
"You've been pretty quiet today, Tom."
That line doesn't make any sense in the context of the episode because Tom was anything but quiet throughout the whole thing. He even had more lines than Ed did, so the line about Tom being quiet makes even less sense. Speaking of which, because of Ed's death, his character had to be given a new voice, and it was given to him by filmmaker Tim Howdekeet. Before part 2 came out, I watched a lot of his videos just out of curiosity, and I quickly became a pretty big fan of his. So when part 2 was finally released, it was really weird hearing his voice coming out of Ed's mouth. But I like that they went with someone that fans of Eddsworld or even fans of Tom weren't entirely familiar with. And looking back, I kinda think the choice of Tim makes sense. He really has this strange quality to him that Ed had, where even when he doesn't put that much effort into his performance, it still works. Unfortunately, he doesn't get to shine that much here, but from what I've heard, I think he's a suitable replacement. How about the animation? Ed wasn't able to finish Space Face before his death, so the rest of it was given to Paul. He is without a doubt one of the greatest living animators out there, and I'm not just saying that because we're friends. His skills are unbelievable, and the work he did for part 2 is just outstanding. For part 1, however, it's just as great, but since the first 2/3 of it were done in Ed's style, the transition into Paul's style seems a bit clunky. As soon as they reach the helm, the characters suddenly have these smoother outlines and are drawn in a drastically different art style. It looks fantastic, don't get me wrong, but it just kinda bothers me how it doesn't match the rest of the episode. Again, this is just for part 1. If it was done to look closer to Ed's style and then Date Night was used as a transition to the new style, that would have been fine. But as it is, it's a bit annoying that it changes so suddenly, but both Ed and Paul did a really good job. One thing I probably should mention is the music. Space Face introduces 2 dedicated composers to the Legacy season, Yoav Landau for part 1 and Todd Bryanton for part 2. Yoav's music has his traditional electronic sound, while Todd's is very orchestral. I like both, I don't really prefer one over the other, and their stuff here is great. But if I had to pick which one I found more memorable, I'd probably go with Yoav's music. It's less atmospheric and more melodic, so yeah. On the whole, Space Face is an awkward but decent transition into the Legacy season, and as an Eddsworld episode, it's still pretty enjoyable. It has its flaws in terms of story, but you can get through it okay. With great animation, epic music, and a cute sense of humor, this would only be the start for a whole new era in the Eddsworld legacy.